197 seconds, equating to exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds, stands as the unprecedented new record. Senator Richard Blumenthal rose to his feet, hoisted a classified dossier above his head, and posed an inquiry that would generate the longest bout of silence in the history of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Mr. Secretary, this dossier indicates that $3.6 billion was authorized for the construction of 7 forward operating bases spread across 3 separate theaters, he declared. The contracts were officially awarded, the capital was fully distributed, the completion certificates are fully signed, yet the bases completely fail to exist. Therefore, I possess one incredibly straightforward inquiry, he noted as he placed the dossier onto his desk. Where exactly are these bases? Hegseth's hands froze entirely motionless against the wooden table. His primary defense attorney seized his wrist while his secondary counsel instinctively reached for her mobile device, but they were entirely too late. The classified dossier was already projected onto every display screen in the chamber, and Blumenthal, a veteran former attorney general who dedicated years to prosecuting construction fraud, had not even begun deconstructing the actual contracts. If you happen to be new to the Homeless People channel, make sure you hit subscribe immediately because what you are preparing to watch is a seasoned prosecutor outlining a massive fraud indictment directly to the perpetrator. We have 7 imaginary bases, $3.6 billion missing, signed completion certificates, physically visited GPS coordinates yielding nothing, and 197 seconds of absolute silence replacing a desperately needed explanation. The setting was Senate Armed Services Committee Room SR 222 on a Thursday morning at precisely 10:29 a.m. Eastern Time. The legislative hearing was officially billed as routine oversight regarding the Department of Defense's military construction spending and forward operating base development protocols. However, this specific proceeding was destined to be anything but routine. Blumenthal entered the chamber clutching an incredibly thick brown classified binder. He positioned it upon his desk before the session even commenced and deliberately ignored it for the initial 53 minutes. He endured the opening statements in total silence, allowed his fellow lawmakers to set the foundational baseline, and observed Hegseth field inquiries regarding procurement timelines and construction management with the calm patience of a man who had devoured the entire file and knew precisely where the trap lay. Hegseth appeared entirely relaxed because inquiries regarding military construction represented deeply familiar territory where his prepared responses were already finalized. He comfortably discussed project phasing schedules, environmental impact assessments, and strict contractor performance metrics. He had recited these exact phrases during prior testimonies, allowing them to flow in a remarkably smooth and heavily rehearsed manner. He remained blissfully unaware of the devastating contents concealed within that brown folder. Those initial 53 minutes consisted of mundane dialogues concerning base construction schedules, vendor selection frameworks, and geographical assessment guidelines. Hegseth delivered highly controlled replies while citing the Military Construction Authorization Act and pointing to the Army Corps of Engineers supervisory structure. He appeared completely at ease, glancing down at his prepared notes on just one occasion before Blumenthal finally secured the microphone. Mr. Secretary, Blumenthal began, his vocal tone remaining flat and incredibly precise, perfectly embodying a legal professional who spent decades presenting hard evidence in courtrooms and never confused theatrical presentation with actual argumentation. On February 14th of the preceding year, your specific department granted 7 military construction agreements totaling an astonishing $3.6 billion. These contracts funded the development of forward operating bases located within 3 distinct international theaters. Every single one of these 7 contracts was awarded to one exclusive prime contractor known as Pacific Rim Defense Construction, LLC. He paused for dramatic effect and asked, "Do you personally recognize that specific vendor's name?" Hegseth briefly checked his notes and deflected by stating that military construction procurement involves a massive roster of contractors, making it impossible to discuss granular details regarding individual awards without possessing the relevant procurement dossiers. "I actually possess the relevant procurement dossiers right here," Blumenthal fired back as he extracted the initial document. This represents the comprehensive contract award paperwork for all 7 installations, which your own agency surrendered to comply with a lawful congressional subpoena, he announced while sliding it beneath the digital projector. We have $3.6 billion, 7 distinct locations, a solitary contractor, fully drained funding accounts, and completion certificates that are both signed and formally submitted. He locked eyes with the witness and proclaimed, "According to these official papers, there are 7 fully constructed forward operating bases." He subsequently produced the second piece of evidence declaring, "This is an official Department of Defense Inspector General site inspection evaluation finalized exactly 11 weeks ago, originally classified as secret but formally declassified for this specific proceeding a mere 48 hours ago." He flipped the report open and detailed how the Inspector General dispatched physical inspection crews to every single GPS coordinate documented on those completion certificates across all 7 sites and all 3 theaters. The investigative crews thoroughly recorded their discoveries using high-resolution photography, physical site measurements, and extensive written evaluations. Blumenthal stared directly at the witness and stated, "Mr. Secretary, at every single one of those 7 supposed locations, the inspection crews discovered the exact same reality." He hoisted a large photograph into the air, revealing nothing but vacant terrain lacking any physical structures, poured foundations, heavy construction machinery, or any tangible proof that building activities had ever occurred at any of the 7 coordinates. He placed the image back down and summarized the situation. $3.6 billion vanished, 7 completion documents authorized, 7 locations physically inspected, and absolutely 0 bases actually constructed. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted with that distinct, crushing permanence that materializes whenever an astronomical financial figure is suddenly equated to the number 0. Blumenthal relentlessly pushed forward without taking a single breath. "I must pause the breakdown right here to emphasize that if you strongly believe a missing $3.6 billion meant for imaginary bases warrants a serious explanation, you need to hype this video immediately." The hype icon is located directly adjacent to the like button, and you are permitted to utilize it 3 times daily without any cost. We possess a 7-day window to propel this broadcast into the top 100 most hyped videos across all of YouTube, making every single interaction critically important. Please execute that action right now and keep watching, because Blumenthal holds 4 additional documents, and the final one features a specific name tying this massive fraud directly back to Hegseth's executive suite. Hegseth's defense counsel leaped out of his chair instantly, arguing, "Mr. Chairman, infrastructure initiatives of this immense scale require incredibly complex operational phasing, and the cited Inspector General report might fail to accurately reflect the current reality of ongoing operations." "The Inspector General report was finalized just 11 weeks ago," Blumenthal shot back without even glancing in the attorney's direction. "The physical inspections were entirely comprehensive. The photographic evidence resides within this binder. Absolutely no bases exist. So take your seat." The lawyer reluctantly sat down as Hegseth leaned aggressively forward toward his microphone. "Senator, military construction within forward operating sectors presents immense logistical hurdles and severe security threats that can drastically obscure visible above-ground progress," Hegseth attempted to argue. "While massive preparatory operations and vital subsurface infrastructure have been successfully finalized, that specific work might remain completely invisible during a standard visual inspection." "Subsurface infrastructure work," Blumenthal repeated, allowing his vocal tone to remain completely devoid of emotion. He retrieved the third piece of evidence and explained, "This represents the official geotechnical surveying report specifically ordered by the Inspector General covering all 7 locations." He cracked the binding and revealed that at every single coordinate, the Inspector General's surveying crew executed exhaustive subsurface evaluations, utilizing advanced ground-penetrating radar alongside deep soil core sampling. The explicit objective was to isolate any hidden subsurface construction activities that a basic visual survey might inadvertently miss. He gently rested the document upon his desk and revealed, "At absolutely 0 out of the 7 inspected sites did the geotechnical survey uncover a single shred of evidence proving subsurface preparation, foundational pouring, utility trenching, or any other construction-adjacent subterranean activity. He glared at Hegseth and emphasized, "Nothing exists above the ground, nothing exists below the surface. We have 7 empty sites, $3.6 billion missing, and absolutely nothing to show for it." He promptly extracted the 4th file from his stack. This constitutes the official corporate registration paperwork for Pacific Rim Defense Construction, LLC, which served as the exclusive contractor for all 7 Phantom bases. He flipped it open and announced the formal date of corporate incorporation as January 31st of the previous year. He looked upward and highlighted, "That date falls exactly 14 days before your department handed them $3.6 billion in taxpayer contracts." He placed the file back down, methodically listing the damning facts. They possessed no prior federal contracting history, 0 military construction background, no registered equipment inventory, and absolutely no personnel roster outside of 3 legally registered corporate officers. Yet this entity was legally formed a mere 2 weeks prior to securing the single most lucrative military construction award of the entire fiscal year. He paused to let the timeline resonate before summarizing, "Therefore, the vendor that secured $3.6 billion to establish 7 forward operating bases did not even exist 3 weeks prior to winning the bid, and those bases still do not exist today." He retrieved his mobile device, launched the digital stopwatch application, and hoisted the screen high into the air. "Mr. Secretary, I dedicated years of my life serving as an attorney general relentlessly prosecuting construction fraud, so I understand exactly what it resembles. I comprehend every underlying mechanism, I can track the exact paper trail it generates, and I am currently staring directly at that undeniable paper trail. I have merely one simple question. Where exactly is the $3.6 billion? He firmly tapped the start button on his screen. At the 10-second mark, Hegseth's jaw noticeably clenched shut. When 20 seconds elapsed, his primary attorney was frantically scribbling notes on a legal pad. At 30 seconds, a Republican lawmaker representing Alabama loudly shifted his posture in obvious discomfort. Hitting the 40-second mark, Blumenthal rose to his feet. "Mr. Secretary, I successfully prosecuted corrupt contractors who robbed local municipalities, individuals who filed fraudulent completion certificates for imaginary labor, and criminals who established shell corporations to siphon public capital into offshore accounts. I have witnessed this exact scheme countless times before. The only varying factor here is the astronomical scale." Passing 50 seconds, Hegseth pressed his palms completely flat against the wooden desk until his knuckles turned entirely white. At 60 seconds, marking 1 full minute of agonizing silence, the digital stopwatch was broadcast across every monitor in the room. Approaching 70 seconds, the committee chairman intervened, stating, "Mr. Secretary, you are currently testifying under oath, so you must answer the senator's inquiry." By 80 seconds, Hegseth shifted his eyes downward to his prepared notes before staring blankly back at the table. Hitting 90 seconds, a Democratic senator representing Illinois interjected, "Mr. Secretary, we are missing $3.6 billion meant for 7 bases that do not exist. Where did the money go?" Reaching 100 seconds, Hegseth simply stared back at her while refusing to utter a single syllable. At 110 seconds, his defense counsel attempted to stand and object, but the chairman aimed a finger directly at him and warned, "I will not repeat myself again." Hitting 120 seconds, crossing the 2-minute threshold, Blumenthal began walking purposefully toward the witness stand. "Mr. Secretary, I possess one final piece of documentary evidence," he announced while reaching deep into the thick brown folder. He extracted the 5th file and held it aloft for the chamber to witness. "This represents the official corporate ownership registry for Pacific Rim Defense Construction, LLC, detailing those 3 previously mentioned registered officers." He opened the document and revealed that 2 of the listed individuals remain completely untraceable across all standard corporate databases. The final individual happens to be a former senior procurement executive operating directly out of the office of the Secretary of Defense, who abandoned his government post in January of last year. He legally incorporated Pacific Rim Defense Construction, LLC, on January 31st, and exactly 14 days afterward, he secured $3.6 billion directly from his previous employer. At the 132nd mark, he set the paper down and stated, "A former executive from your department launched a shell corporation. Your department handed that empty company $3.6 billion. The company constructed absolutely nothing, and the taxpayer capital is completely gone." By 140 seconds, Hegseth's complexion had drained into a sickly gray, while the muscle pulsing near his jawline became wildly apparent. At 150 seconds, a Republican senator from Georgia softly asked, "Pete, where exactly did the money go?" Passing 160 seconds, Hegseth briefly glanced at his colleague, offered zero response, and returned his gaze to the desk. Hitting 170 seconds, a Republican lawmaker from Tennessee firmly stated, "This involves a former staffer from your direct office. You are obligated to answer this." Reaching 184 seconds, well past 3 full minutes, Blumenthal glanced down at his glowing stopwatch. "Mr. Secretary, I intend to count precisely to 190, at which point every single document contained inside this binder officially enters the permanent congressional record. Every awarded contract, every fraudulent completion certificate, every Inspector General site photograph, the damning geotechnical survey, and the corporate registration files, all of it becomes entirely public and permanently archived. This creates a permanent record showing how funds were wired to foreign countries, with every receiving account tied to a shell corporation that magically dissolved within 90 days of securing the cash." He firmly tapped the stop button and hoisted the digital timer into the air, declaring, 3 minutes and 17 seconds establishes the brand new record. He pivoted toward the committee leadership and announced, "Mr. Chairman, considering the witness has definitively refused to answer, I formally move to enter all 5 evidentiary documents directly into the congressional record. I additionally move to refer this entire scandal to the Department of Justice to launch a criminal probe targeting potential violations of 18 U.S.C. 1031 for executing major fraud against the United States, 18 U.S.C. 626 for stealing from federally funded programs, and 18 U.S.C. 1001 for delivering false statements to Congress. Furthermore, I move that the FBI initiate an immediate criminal probe targeting Pacific Rim Defense Construction, LLC, alongside every single individual tied to its sudden incorporation and massive contract award." All 3 distinct motions received immediate seconds from both Republican and Democratic lawmakers alike, leading to their unanimous passage. Blumenthal methodically gathered his scattered paperwork and offered Hegseth one final piercing stare. "Mr. Secretary, I dedicated years of my professional life to prosecuting criminals who executed the exact scheme described within these pages, establishing a shell corporation, securing a massive public contract, performing zero labor, and making the cash vanish. While the financial scale presented here completely dwarfs anything I handled as an attorney general, the underlying fraudulent mechanism remains completely identical." He firmly snapped the thick brown folder shut. 197 seconds stands as the new benchmark. That is exactly how long you chose to sit mutely rather than clarify where $3.6 billion evaporated. We have 7 military installations that entirely failed to exist, 1 empty shell company formed a mere 14 days prior to securing the bid, 1 former executive from your own suite holding the corporate registration, and 197 agonizing seconds of absolute silence where a viable explanation desperately belonged. He subsequently turned his back and walked away from the witness podium. Make sure to subscribe to the Homeless People channel immediately because tomorrow we will publicly reveal the identity of the former defense official who launched Pacific Rim Defense Construction, LLC. We will also publish his complete federal employment history, outline the exact procurement contracts he managed before resigning, and expose the specific offshore banking account the FBI is actively hunting down. This massive investigation is absolutely not finished. It is truthfully just getting started. The uncovered documents are entirely authentic. The Inspector General's photographs are undeniable. The issued subpoenas are legally binding. And Pete Hegseth just cemented a devastating new record by maintaining absolute silence for 197 seconds instead of explaining how threes. 6 billion vanish for 7 forward operating bases that remain completely imaginary. Smash that like button and distribute this broadcast everywhere you possibly can, because we are looking at 7 phantom bases, $3.6 billion stolen, 1 empty shell company, 1 corrupt former employee, 0 actual construction, and 197 seconds of silence, cementing a historic new record that now resides permanently within the official congressional record.